Imagine being accused of a crime you didn't commit. The evidence is stacked against you, the key witness points the finger, and the entire world believes you're guilty. But what if that witness is lying? What if the truth is buried under a web of threats, corruption, and deceit? This is the story of Ayan, a young man fighting for his life in a courtroom where justice hangs by a thread. And his only hope. The courtroom was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional shuffle of papers. The tension was palpable, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. The case had dragged on for weeks, and now, it was finally coming to a head. The defendant, a young man named Ayan, sat at the defense table, his face pale and drawn. He was accused of a crime he swore he didn't commit, murder. The prosecution had presented a strong case, a motive, circumstantial evidence, and a witness who claimed to have seen Ayan near the scene of the crime. But the defense had one last card to play, and it was a card that could change everything. The defense lawyer, Zayn, was a seasoned attorney with a reputation for being relentless in the courtroom. He had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, and now, as he stood before the jury, he was ready to make his final plea. Letting his words sink in. Then, he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to call one final witness to the stand." The judge, a stern-looking man with a no-nonsense demeanor, raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, you have already rested your case." "This is highly irregular," Zayn nodded. "I understand, Your Honor, but this witness has just come forward with crucial information that could exonerate my client. I ask for the court's indulgence." The judge considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Call your witness." Zayn turned to the bailiff. "I call Mr. Fahad to the stand." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as a man in his late 40s, dressed in a simple suit, made his way to the witness stand. He was sworn in, and Zayn began his questioning. "Mr. Fahad, can you please state your full name and occupation for the record?" "My name is Fahad Ahmed, and I am a taxi driver," the man replied, his voice trembling slightly. The judge considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Call your witness." Zayn turned to the bailiff. "I call Mr. Fahad to the stand." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as a man in his late 40s, dressed in a simple suit, made his way to the witness stand. He was sworn in, and Zayn began his questioning. "Mr. Fahad, can you please state your full name and occupation for the record?" "My name is Fahad Ahmed, and I am a taxi driver," the man replied, his voice trembling slightly. "At around 10:30 p.m., Fahad replied. "Did you see anything unusual that night?" Fahad hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I did. I saw a man running from the park. He looked scared, like he was being chased." "Can you describe this man?" Fahad nodded again. "He was tall, with dark hair. He was wearing a black jacket and jeans." Zayn turned to the jury, then back to Fahad. "Mr. Fahad, is that man in the courtroom today?" Fahad pointed to Ayan. "Yes, that's him." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Zayn waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "Mr. Fahad, are you absolutely certain that the man you saw running from the park was Ayan?" Fahad nodded. "Yes, I'm sure. I've known Ayan for years. I'd recognize him anywhere." Zayn turned to the jury, his expression grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the man the prosecution has built their case on. A man who claims to have seen my client fleeing the scene of the crime. But what if I told you that Mr. Fahad is lying? What if I told you that he has a reason to want my client convicted?" The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, jumped to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making baseless accusations." The judge raised his hand. Overruled. "Counselor, you may proceed, but tread carefully." Zayn nodded, then turned back to Fahad. "Mr. Fahad, isn't it true that you owe a significant amount of money to a local loan shark?" Fahad's eyes widened, and he shook his head. "No, that's not true." Zayn pulled out a document from his folder. "Your Honor, I have here a copy of a loan agreement between Mr. Fahad and a known criminal, Mr. Bilal." The agreement states that Mr. Fahad owes Mr. Bilal a sum of 500,000 rupees, with a deadline for repayment that passed just 2 days before the murder. The judge took the document and examined it, then nodded. Proceed, Zain turned back to Fahad. Mr. Fahad, isn't it true that Mr. Bilal threatened you if you didn't pay him back? Fahad looked down, his hands trembling. Yes, he whispered, and isn't it also true that Mr. Bilal offered to forgive your debt if you testified against my client? Fahad didn't answer, but the look on his face was enough. Zain turned to the jury, his voice rising with passion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the truth. The prosecution's key witness has been coerced into lying on the stand. He has been threatened, manipulated, and used as a pawn in a game of lies and deceit. My client is innocent, and I ask you to see through the smoke and mirrors and deliver a verdict based on the truth. The courtroom was silent as Zain returned to his seat. The jury deliberated for hours, but in the end, they returned with a verdict of not guilty. Ayan was free, and Zain had once again proven why he was one of the best defense attorneys in the city, but as Zain left the courtroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. And he was determined to find out the truth, no matter where it led him. The hidden truth, the days following the trial were a whirlwind of media attention and public scrutiny. Ayan was hailed as a victim of a corrupt system, while Fahad was vilified as a liar and a pawn. But Zain couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. He decided to dig deeper, starting with Fahad. He tracked him down to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Fahad was hesitant to talk at first, but Zain's persistence paid off. I didn't want to lie, Fahad admitted, his voice filled with guilt. But I had no choice. Bilal threatened to kill me if I didn't testify against Ayan. Zain nodded, his expression grim. I understand. But why did Bilal want Ayan convicted? What does he have to gain? Fahad hesitated, then sighed. Bilal is involved in a lot of illegal activities, drugs, smuggling, you name it. Ayan's father was a journalist who was investigating Bilal's operations. He was getting too close to the truth, so Bilal had him killed. Ayan was just a pawn in his game. Zain's eyes widened. Are you saying that Ayan's father was murdered because of his investigation? Fahad nodded. Yes. And Bilal wanted Ayan out of the way too, just in case he decided to continue his father's work. Zain's mind raced. If what Fahad was saying was true, then Bilal was not just a lone shark, he was a dangerous criminal who needed to be stopped. Fahad, I need your help to bring Bilal down. Will you testify against him? Fahad looked terrified. If I do, he'll kill me. Zain placed a hand on Fahad's shoulder. I'll protect you. But we need to stop him before he hurts anyone else. Fahad hesitated, then nodded. All right. I'll do it. The final showdown, with Fahad's cooperation, Zain was able to gather enough evidence to bring Bilal to trial. It was a risky move. Bilal was a powerful man with connections in high places, but Zain was determined to see justice served. The trial was a media circus, with reporters from all over the country covering the case. Bilal's defense team was ruthless, but Zain was prepared. He presented the evidence, called witnesses, and made a compelling case against Bilal. But the most dramatic moment came when Fahad took the stand. He testified about Bilal's threats, his involvement in Ayan's father's murder, and his illegal activities. It was a powerful testimony, and it left the jury with no doubt about Bilal's guilt. In the end, Bilal was convicted on multiple charges, including murder, extortion, and drug trafficking. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Epilogue: Ayan approached Zain after the trial, his eyes filled with gratitude. I can't thank you enough for what you've done. You saved my life, Zain smiled. It's what I do. But remember, the fight for justice never ends. Stay strong, and never stop seeking the truth. Ayan nodded, a newfound determination in his eyes. I won't. And I'll make sure my father's work isn't in vain. As Zain watched Ayan walk away, he knew that he had made a difference. And that was all the reward he needed.